One of the most important things that we can do as believers have a designated time where we meet with the Lord. Well, we call that a quiet time. Think about it. In the Garden of Gethsemane, in Genesis 1 and 2, we see that God created man to be with him. So man had a relationship where he talked with God, walked with God. You see throughout the whole text of the Bible that God met with Moses as one man meets with another. Well, again, you see later on, and we can talk about many different characters from Abraham, Isaac, where God met with them. But let me jump forward to Jesus. Jesus meeting with Matthew says, "Come follow me." Well, Matthew 4:19, "Come follow me and I'll make you a fisher of men." Then in Matthew 9, he goes up to Matthew, the tax collector, and says, "Come be with me." In Mark 3, we see that Jesus chose 12 disciples to be with him. So what is a quiet time? A quiet time is spending time with God. It's getting in His Word and spending time in prayer with God. So just to help you formulate your quiet time, I just want to give you some quick tips and maybe lay out a structure. So quick tip number one is pick a place. Pick a place that is good in private so that you can meet with God. Pick a time. Set it on your phone every time. Every day this time I'm going to meet with the Lord. Put an alarm on your phone, on your calendar, on your phone. Make sure that you don't schedule anything around that time. Next is be alone. Don't have the ESPN on. Don't have the TV on. Don't have music on. I mean, I guess if you want to put music on, put worship music or classical music, but don't be distracted. Pray. I think something that's been really helpful to me in my quiet time is I ask the Lord, would you come and meet with me? I don't think that that's a prayer request the Lord's going to deny you. If you come to Him faithfully every day, God, I need you. I want to meet with you. I think God's going to meet with you. So the question is, where to start? When I first began at a very young age digging in God's Word, I always start in Genesis. I have to read it over and over again. Well, think about it this way. When you are young, you start on milk. That's what Peter tells us, that we should crave pure spiritual milk. Well, as a baby, you have milk, and then over time, you maybe go to chicken nuggets or green beans, and then eventually you go to steak. And so sometimes we start in Genesis or Leviticus or something in the Old Testament, but we really should be starting in the Gospels. So I recommend people to start in the book of Mark. And the reason why the book of Mark, because it's very concise, it's very actionable. You get to see Jesus doing things very quickly, and so it doesn't take a lot of context to understand. Matthew's written in the context of persuading Jews to follow Jesus. Luke is beautifully written as well, but Mark is more common. It's quicker paced. And of course, I love the book of John as well. I love all four of them, actually. So, but I recommend typically the book of Mark to start. Just my suggestion. So how much should I read? And so sometimes I hear people like, I have a verse of the day. Well, that's not going to help, because if I'm taking stuff out of context, that's not going to be helpful to my soul. So I always recommend reading through a whole book, start to finish, one chapter a day. I think one chapter is a healthy amount, unless you go to like Psalms, was it 118, 119, that's extremely long, then maybe you need to break it up. But I think you can read most chapters in the Bible in 5 to 6 minutes, and so it's really not that bad. So I think that reading a chapter into a whole book is going to help you get the whole story. See, God wrote a book, and in that book He wrote books, and in those books He wrote chapters. Now, chapters came afterwards. I'm not going to get into that. But so when God wrote a book, He sent a message. So the book of Mark is a message. And so instead of jumping all over the Bible, stay in the book of Mark. I recommend typically go from Mark to Ephesians or Philippians, and I'll get to that in a second. Anyways, how much should I read? A chapter. I love recommending at least one chapter in my quiet time. I also recommend having underlining and highlighting system. I have 8 pencils, so they don't bleed through, and it's actually in one mechanism, but I have 8 different colors I highlight. So I have a system. I know that the color blue represents the majesty and the nature and the character of God. I know that green is challenge or conviction. I know brown is sin. I know red is Jesus Christ. So I have an underlining system that helps me. Also, a journal. A journal is going to be very helpful. Then I think my ninth quick tip is share or ask questions. Those are extremely important. Number 10 is commit. Commit to a daily plan to get in God's Word. So if I could recommend a plan for you, the beginner plan is 1 chapter a day, starting in the book of Mark or John, then go to Ephesians or Colossians, and then to Genesis. I think that is a really good plan. My second plan that I love to recommend to people is a plan that I did for years. It's called the Cornerstone. It's 3 chapters a day. It's reading chronologically through Psalms. So it's Psalms is 150 chapters, so it's 150 days of reading. So 1 chapter a day. Then whatever day of the month it is, read that chapter in Proverbs. So today's the 21st, 22nd. That's the chapter I would read in Proverbs. And then lastly, the third section is I'm going to read, again, starting in Mark or Philippians, Ephesians, Exodus, Luke, 1st, 2nd Peter, and that's kind of the list I go by. And lastly, and this is the one that I'm more on right now, is the Berean. The Berean is 1 chapter in the Old Testament daily, 1 chapter in the New Testament daily, and then a chapter in another section, maybe we call it wisdom literature, which is Ecclesiastes, Psalms, Proverbs, something like that. I'm also reading a historical, so I'm reading three chapters in the Old Testament, 1 in the New right now, and it's just the way my quiet time's going. And so I would recommend having a plan, and you have to have a plan if you are planning on meeting with God. So I hope that helps, and if so, encourage someone else in their walk to dig into God's Word.